is an all blues Thursday right here at Pope Market Juke Joint.
The Mississippi Delta is known for music and for juke joints like this one.
It's the Juke Joint Blues, man.
And for rich agricultural land. Cotton was once the main crop here, now mostly corn. Despite how fertile the ground is here, 1 in 5 households live below the poverty line. And in fact, Mississippi is ranked 50th out of 50 states by poverty rate. 68-year-old Catherine Wilson has lived here her whole life.
You know, back then in the 60s when, just like we had to move from home to home because we didn't have enough to eat, enough money to survive on.
In 1964, President Johnson introduced legislation to deal with a national poverty rate that was almost 20%. It became known as the War on Poverty. Jobs, training, adult education, and loans were all part of that plan. In April of 1967, Senator Robert Kennedy visited the Delta to have a look for himself at how bad the poverty actually was.
So this is 1967. That's Bobby Kennedy right there.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And who's that lady in the striped dress? Yeah?
Oh,
Pretty good, huh?
My goodness.
That's a nice smile, right? You remember that?
Yeah, I remember the day he came, all right.
What did he want to know? What did he ask you about?
Asking what did we want to see done. They say they want jobs and housing.
Blacks in the Delta had historically worked the land, but mechanization and pesticides meant fewer jobs and less money.
We've come a long way since back then. We were so poor and struggling, we didn't have anything. But right now, a lot of people got jobs and couldn't get no job back then.
Catherine Wilson lives alone in a place called Freedom Village, built originally to house those displaced farm workers. Peter Edelman was an aide to Bobby Kennedy. He was with him on that 1967 trip to the Delta.
He said to me, as we went from one house to the next, that this was worse than anything he'd ever seen in a third world country.
Marion Wright had been working in the Delta, opening Head Start offices to help low-income families. She's the one who convinced Kennedy to come to Mississippi. There is a little bit of romance in this story. Marion Wright and Peter Edelman met on that trip to the Delta. They have been married for almost 40 years. Marion Wright Edelman went on to create the Children's Defense Fund. Catherine Wilson, meanwhile, did get some education and training from the programs that grew out of the War on Poverty. But the economy today isn't the same economy that we had half a century ago.
What has happened over the last 40 years is that we've had a major change in our economy. Good jobs have gone to technology, to globalization, and the consequence is that half of our population is not earning enough to support their families, and a whole lot of them can't find jobs at all.
Catherine Wilson's had a whole series of part-time jobs, but she's never made much money. She survived mostly on government assistance. She is now on Social Security. 22% of the people in Mississippi rely on food stamps.
Some things have gotten better. We've got a middle class that wasn't there.
But there is still lots missing.
Over 80% of the black children in Mississippi cannot read or compute at grade level in 4th or 8th grade. What is a child going to do if they can't read and compute at the most basic levels?
In Cleveland, those basic levels are determined in part by literally what side of the tracks you grew up on. Economic mobility, or the lack of it, is plain to see. The unemployment rate for whites is 6%. For African Americans, it is 22%.
Our goal with this project is to promote racial healing inside our communities.
Travis Calvin runs the Delta State University Mobile Music Lab. It's a refurbished school bus outfitted with a complete recording studio.
Our group in Clarksdale, Mississippi is about 30 miles north of here. Just like the Delta, it's rich in history, rich in the blues, rich in musical culture, but a really bad town when it comes to crime rate. I came to Delta State and it was my way out, so I feel like it's my duty to pay it forward.
The program Travis runs, it's called Healing with a Groove, focuses on young men of color, guys like 16-year-old Amidas Siegel. What would your life be like if you hadn't found this?
I don't know. I'll probably be in a world I don't need to be in. A lot of my friends, they do stuff they don't need to do. That's why I don't hang with some of them.
Mike Carr is from the other side of the tracks. He's a public defender in Cleveland.
It was a wonderful place to grow up, but I'm very privileged, all right? I grew up with two parents that were middle class, that were educated, that encouraged me.
Not all kids, though, in this town have that same deal, right?
No, absolutely not. I spend 70% of my practice dealing with people who are at the bottom of the barrel, in the sense that they have not only just financially absolutely nothing, but just emotionally they also have absolutely nothing.
Nationwide, the wealth gap between white and black households has grown dramatically since the Great Recession. According to a report from the Pew Research Center, white households have net worths 13 times higher than black families do. In Cleveland, the median income for a black family is less than half of that for a white family.
But we are still divided to a certain extent.
Do you feel it? You feel it every day?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But you can't say nothing about it, you know.
Lifelong Cleveland resident Jimmy Williams has owned this soul food restaurant since 1994, once a meeting spot for civil rights activists and leaders like Martin Luther King Jr.
Back during the civil rights movement, you know, all the people that were coming to Cleveland would meet here. It was Lily's Cafe back then.
When you look around today, though, at the young people in this town, where do they go when they get out of high school?
Most of them is in the streets. They don't go anywhere. They into drug business because there's no jobs here. And because there's no jobs, the education standard is not where it needs to be to entice companies to want to come here.
So Bobby Kennedy comes here in 1967, right? Almost 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Has it been wasted time?
Has been wasted time.
Catherine Wilson is more optimistic. She'd like to see Freedom Village become a place to help those in need.
I ain't giving up Freedom Village, and I still believe.
For the PBS NewsHour in Cleveland, Mississippi, this is Ryssdal.